Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. We're glad you stuck around because this is the portion of the show where we have our guests, and we always have the very best guests. And I'll be honest, Rick Manning hasn't always been one of our best guests because he used to be one of our best co-hosts, and now he's one of our best guests. He's the president of Americans for Limited Government. He was also a member of President Trump's transition team, and he's the author of a book with Star Parker, The Necessary Noise, How Donald Trump Inflames the Culture War and Why That Is Good for America. We're very glad to have you, Rick. It's always a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, George. How are you?
Life is good. Life is good.
We haven't talked since Thanksgiving. I assume you had a good turkey day?
We did. I went down and visited my son. It was a lot of fun. He's down in Alabama, and so we did a little traveling, but it was great to be with family.
Yeah, it really is. What people out there may not know is that not only am I a guest and sometimes co-host, but we're actually friends. So it's a
there you go.
So they really get to, when we talk, we're just talking friends, shooting it around, and I always enjoy hearing what you've got to say, and presumably I give your throat a chance to slow down by me talking all the time.
No, that's great. It actually gives the our listeners and our viewers a break from George too, which they probably much appreciate.
Too much
with that, what's on your radar screen?
Well, I will tell you, one of the things I think is significant is so many people are concerned about the vaccine mandates and the crazy attempts by the federal government to have either have businesses fire people based on OSHA, based on Health and Human Services, trying to fire doctors and nurses, or having businesses do Joe Biden's dirty work for them and just fire people based on not being vaccinated. And a lot of people are concerned about that. And quite honestly, it's one of those things where Congress has done some posturing, but they haven't actually done anything. And we're in a position right now in the next, probably the next 6 weeks, where Congress is going to have an opportunity to actually do something to stop the vaccine mandates and also to take away Joe Biden's ability to ration drugs and its entirety, because we have the government that needs to be funded. And that means the Department of Labor and OSHA within the Department of Labor is being funded by Congress. It means that Health and Human Services is being funded by Congress. And on the immigration front, it means that Homeland Security is being funded by Congress. And so all those Republican senators, it takes 60 votes to pass the budget, to pass the spending bill. And that means 10 Republicans have to vote for it.
Make sure you explain to folks why it's not 50, because sometimes the number is 50 and sometimes it's 60. Make sure our viewers and our listeners know why, because that's an important distinction.
We've talked a lot about budget reconciliation. This is different. The regular funding of the government requires a 60-vote majority. It's a filibuster. You can filibuster the appropriations bills. And the reason for that is it's really the basis of minority rights and defending of minority rights in the Senate. And so it gives the minority, in this case 50 Republicans, the ability to influence the spending policies in the country. And obviously the bill has to be signed by the president, it has to be agreed to by the House, start in the House, Senate then makes their revisions, the House then has to approve the Senate revisions, or they have to come together through a conference and agree on something. And then the president has to sign it in order for it to become law. Bottom line is, this is really the only place in this system where Republicans can actually push their policies, because Republicans can block Democrats from passing legislation by not giving them a filibuster-proof majority. They can block nominees and at least try to, although now it's just 50 votes for the nominees. But this is the one place it's a must-pass piece of legislation. It has to pass, or the government isn't funded. Recognizing it's about 35% of the government spending that they're appropriating, not 100%. And defense takes up about 17% of that, and the rest of the programs take up 17% of that, 18%. So it's a relatively small amount of the overall government spending that Congress votes on. But the fact is that's what they're voting on. And if Congress does not authorize the expenditure of money, those agencies can't spend money. And that's where the power lies. And that's why when we talk about defunding, that is a very powerful tool, because you can defund and tell an agency that they can't do something. They cannot spend money that Congress has authorized to do something. For instance, during the Obama years and the beginning of the Trump years, they passed something that said the Obama regulation, which federalized local zoning, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, could not spend money promoting that particular regulation. And as a result, that regulation was essentially put on hold until the Trump administration was able to rip it out, which they did finally in their 4th year. So that's an example. So how does that apply? Right now, the Labor Department has OSHA with an emergency regulation that demands that companies that have more than 100 employees either fire those employees who aren't vaccinated or won't show proof of vaccination, or force those employees to go through a bunch of rigmarole to keep their job, or be fined minimum of $14,000 per violation per employee who's not vaccinated. That's the OSHA regulation. Congress can say, you can't enforce that regulation. You can spend no money enforcing that regulation.
Yeah. And that means they can't even write a letter, because the paper has to be bought, the employee's time to write the letter, the computer that it's written on. When we say you can't spend money, we don't mean you can't just write checks. It means that nothing that costs money can be done, and everything government does is cost money. So that basically is a hard stop.
It is a hard stop. And the reason I bring this up is because senators in particular have been, 50 senators supposedly oppose the vax mandate, and they voted on a meaningless vote at some point in the past saying that. Here's the reality. If 50 Republican senators said, we are not funding the OSHA mandate, we will not allow the Department of Labor, we will not allow OSHA to implement that mandate. That mandate can't be implemented. Or the Democrats want to fight about it, the government shuts down. At least the Labor Department shuts down. They could fund other aspects of the government if they wanted to, but the Labor Department shuts down. Similarly, if they wanted to say Center for Medicare Services, CMS, can't put strictures on hospitals and say we will not reimburse for Medicare patients if you do not enforce the vaccine mandate amongst your healthcare providers, amongst your employees, you could say, no, you can't do that through a defund, through putting specific language in that prohibits certain activity. That is real power. And that's why
it's called the power of the purse.
Right now, those Republicans in the Senate in particular, but in the House also, but the Senate in particular, have the capacity to put a hard stop on the entirety of the Biden vaccine mandate. And quite honestly, posturing is interesting. The courts are doing some great work. States are standing up and doing the right thing in a lot of places. But right now, the focus needs to be on Congress and getting those Republicans to actually stand up, get a backbone, do their job, and stop this and refuse to fund it. The Democrats would. The Democrats shut down the government during the Trump administration, I think it was 2017, over a refuse, it's 2018 or 2019, over the wall. They said, we're not funding the wall and nothing you could do. And they shut down the government because they wouldn't want to fund the wall. Now, President Trump won that battle and the wall got funded, but they delayed it. They put a lot of problems into it. They put kinks in the system. And so the Democrats were willing to fight over keeping open borders. That's what the Democrats will want to stand up for. The question is, are the Senate Republicans going to fight over whether we're going to close the borders in the midst of this new variant that's coming that's supposed to be disastrous? We got to shut down New York before it's ever here. Oh my God. Well, the Republicans shut down the borders and force it through a defund. Will they stop the Biden vax mandates?
Yeah.
They have the power to do it. That's what's important right now.
All right. They have the power. The question is, will they? Do you think they will fold, or do you think that they will hang tough and do the right thing here? Because so often the Republicans seem afraid that the Washington Post might write mean things about them.
Yeah, I believe that what will happen is the government will run out of money, not be able to be spending more money on December 3, that 35% of the government. It's really 17 because they always do defense separately. So 17% of the government will essentially shut down on December 3 at midnight. I think it's pretty clear they're going to kick the can on that and make no changes to the budget and kick it down to January, probably middle of January. So between now and middle of January is when the people need to stand up and say to their senators, to their congressmen, defund this. Do your job.
Enough is enough. Yeah.
Do not be afraid. Enough is enough. We aren't putting up with this anymore. And oh, by the way, Republicans are saying, gee, put us in charge of the Senate. You can trust us. They're saying, put us in charge of the House. You can trust us. If they won't fight for you now when they want your vote to put them in charge, they will not fight for you next year when they have control. Okay? Now is the time to find out if they're willing to fight.
Yeah.
And that is what this is about. This is a test whether or not they're worthy of being in the majority.
I think that's a very, very important point. Senator Wallop used to be frustrated when people would say to him, we can't vote on this because we'll lose. And he would say, but if we don't vote on it, and this is an analogous principle, he says, if we don't vote on it, then we're going to be stuck going to the electorate telling them, well, we would have voted on this, we would have promoted this idea, but we knew the other side wouldn't agree, and since we're in the minority, so please send us reinforcements to Washington so we can do this. He said, no, we need to have this fight publicly. We need to debate this thing. We need to work hard to get it passed. And if we fail by 5 votes, we know who's at fault, and the public will know who's at fault. So his point was, is even sometimes losing a debate is okay because it helps you educate the public as to why things aren't going well. And in this case, the Republicans need to stand firm for the same purpose, which is A, to stop the bad stuff, but to educate the public as to who's on their side. Why should we assume that that they're on our side if they won't act when they have the power to do so?
Bottom line is, the left said this all the time during the George Floyd stuff. Complicity is agreement. Well, complicity in allowing the funding of the vax mandates is agreement because they have the power to stop it. And, they are going to come to each one of us and say, support us. We're not Biden. We can stand up to Biden, blah, blah, blah. We're at a point in history where we can no longer just kind of tread water. We can't just say, oh, well, we're going to stop more bad stuff from happening. It's time to stand up and start reversing the bad stuff that happened. Right. We've spent a year on defense, done a good job on defense. We're much better than I expected. We're much better shape now than I thought we would be. But right now, these Republicans can actually impose their will and demonstrate that they have earned the right to be in the majority. Yeah. Because too many of us remember that they were going to repeal Obamacare.
Yeah.
Too many of us remember, give us the majority, we'll tear it out root and branch.
Yeah.
And guess what? The reason that the federal government has the power over your doctors in terms of treatments and all that is because Obamacare wasn't torn out root and branch. Right. And our medical profession is completely dependent upon the federal government based on both certification and other things. And because of that, we don't have treatment regimens out there. It has to be a brave doctor to stand up and say, yeah, I'm going to provide treatments.
Yeah.
Treatments for patients on deadly diseases. That should not be an act of bravery by a doctor because we didn't tear it out root and branch. The federal government has that kind of power. And that is because we didn't force them to prove it first. This is the opportunity to force the Senate to prove it. Prove it now. Show me that you will do something with your majority by doing something right now with the power you do have. If you use that power, this is kind of biblical. If it's the talents, the story of the talents. If you use the talents that you're given, you'll be blessed with more. But if you bury them, they're going to be taken away from you and given to somebody who will.
Right. So I think that's a very, very cogent point. I think you're exactly right. And so I hope I hope that this letter writing campaign that you're talking about catches fire. I hope it becomes.
People can go to getliberty.org, and I'll have a button on there that you'll be able to see, and just click on it and take action. Right here when you're watching the show, just go on to getliberty.org right now. There'll be a button on the front page. Click on the button that says Stop Vax Mandates, and it'll allow you to send a letter to Congress urging them to defund the vaccine mandates. It's easy. It's one click. You put your name in, and emails are sent.
Excellent. We should take a break right there, but we've got more to discuss, so I'm glad you can stick around for another segment, Rick. I'm George Landreth. He's Rick Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government. Don't go away. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. We're glad you stuck around. We've been talking with Rick Manning, who's the president of Americans for Limited Government. We start off talking about budgets, the whole concept of funding the government and how the Republicans can use that issue to impose some realism and sanity when it comes to vax mandates, border security, things like that. But let's shift gears and talk a little about this. Build back better, which I think it's actually build back broke, but they just don't know which B it is. But almost $2 trillion. Let's talk about that level of insanity, because we've already spent just trillions and trillions of dollars. So it's like, when will it ever end?
Well, the fact is, if the Democrats have their way, it never will. Let's just very simply, we just got done in the last segment talking about the regular budget process. And the regular budget process, which requires for appropriations 60 votes in the Senate and the like. Most people who are watching who've been paying attention to this show know that the reconciliation the reconciliation process is different than that, and that it's 1 or 2 times a year you can kind of readjust the budget. And by doing so, it has to be balanced, but you're able to then put new projects in, but you have to pay for them by either cutting something else or raising taxes. And that's the rule. It makes it so in the Senate, you only need 50 votes to rebalance that and through the reconciliation process. So you need the House to agree, you need the Senate to agree with 50 votes plus 1, and you need the president to sign off on it to do that. So that's the process they're using, and I think most people are aware of that, to try to pass some of the most aggressive social changes, governmental changes in the history of this country. In fact, I would argue that what they're trying to pass is more aggressive than anything FDR did, because FDR passed stuff in individual pieces of legislation where they were debated. What the Democrats are attempting to do is make wholesale changes in the fundamental principles of our country, and the relationship between the federal government and the individuals and the states and the localities. They want to do that by one massive bill where nobody actually discusses what's in it and what they're trying to do. And the most ironic thing is they're doing it, and it's supposed to be balanced, and yet the Congressional Budget Office says it's about $367 billion out of balance, so over 10 years. So it doesn't meet the basic criteria of being balanced that the budget reconciliation process requires. So it'll be interesting to see if the Senate parliamentarian shoots it down the House bill that passed entirely, because it doesn't come into balance and so it doesn't qualify under budget reconciliation. But if it does, the stumbling blocks for the Democrats, all 50 Republicans are against it. Stumbling blocks are Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. And the question comes down to, what are those 2 senators going to do? They need to get both of them, because if the Democrats can get to 50, with Kamala Harris, they get 51 and they win. So whatever they can get 51 on passes. So the question is, what happens and what's in it? So I think that's worth talking a little bit about.
No, I think it is. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there, everything from Green New Deal stuff, which will be really bad for our economic recovery because you make energy more expensive, less reliable, wasting lots of tax dollars. We have this out-of-control inflation. It's edging up towards 7% right now, somewhere in the 6 point somethings. And it's historically high, and you don't solve inflation by the government. Like you don't put fires out by throwing gallons of gas on it. You don't drown a fire with gasoline, and you don't drown inflation with government wasteful spending.
Well, you don't drown inflation by flooding the economy with dollars,
Yeah.
which is what they're doing. Inflation matters because particularly Joe Manchin from West Virginia has said he really has reservations about voting for anything that's inflationary. And because he represents people in West Virginia, and when gas prices go up in West Virginia, people pay it, and West Virginia his constituents aren't wealthy people. His constituents are blue collar people who can't just, give themselves a raise, float another hedge fund bond, do something like that. Their people work for a living. They get their hands dirty. They're on incomes that can't just go up or down to meet the inflation. And as a result, more and more of their money is being taken out of their pockets by price of food, price of housing, price of cars, price of everything, price of gasoline and energy. And those are directly related to Joe Biden's policies, and putting more money into the economy to chase fewer goods and services creates inflation. And Joe Manchin knows that. And so that's his argument against spending the money. And that's really, really important for people so it matters. Let me give you something which I just came up with, George, in the break. And so it's always dangerous, when you come up with stuff during a break to shoot it out there before you've kind of thought about it. But what the heck, we're just friends, so it's okay. It seems to me we all have these funny little phones, these things, and they all have those little, how all the kids are always snapping shots and doing selfies and stuff. You know what every single member of Congress should get? I mean, at least your congressmen, your senators, maybe even your governors and others. Go to your gas station, take a selfie with the price of the gas on the gas tank, how much it costs to fill up your tank. After you've filled up your tank, the $52 that it shows, take a selfie with the $52 to fill up a tank of gas, and just share that, and send it to your elected officials, and say, with a simple message, stop spending now. Okay? Simple message. You only need those 3 words. Stop spending now. Go to the grocery store, and look at a roast. It's actually, I'm going to be surprised if the smash and grab robbers in California don't breaking into grocery stores and stealing meat, because it's more valuable than jewelry. But you go and you look at a roast, you look at a steak, and you take a picture of the price of the steak, and you send it to people, and you say, stop spending now. We have to personalize inflation to these guys. These guys live in an imaginary world where money is they can just create it out of thin air. But the fact is, inflation, you pay it. It's a tax on you through the increased cost of goods and services. And the best way to impress your elected officials that you've caught on to the game, Republican or Democrat, is to take a picture of the increased prices and tell them a simple message: stop spending now.
Yeah. No, that'll have a real impact. I think that's a very, very good point. We're just about out of time, and I want to leave a little extra time for this part of the conversation, because I wanted to ask you, I understand you've got a kind of a gift shop that you've developed there at getliberty.org, and I'd like you to tell us a little about that as well, but also how we can follow your work, obviously getliberty.org, but the whole 9 yards, any way we can get more involved, be more aware of the need for limited government and to promote liberty and freedom.
Yeah, thanks, George. First and foremost, go to getliberty.org. That's our kind of a corporate website, but there's a lot of things that are happening there. You can get to the blog off of that. You can get to basically everything we do. But go to getliberty.org. Click the button in terms of taking action, and take action. Engage. Because anybody who takes action, we're going to then be talking to you about all the other things that are going on. You'll get the same newsletter George gets. And it is free to you to do this, okay? There's no cost to take action. There is a section where after you take action, do you want to give money? You don't have to give money. This is a free service. I pay for it because I want you, because you have the power. Senators think they have the power. You have the power because you've got the one thing they need from you every 6 years, and that's your support. So they have to, if they don't listen to you, get rid of them. That's your power. So engaging now is part of that exercise of your power. And each one of us needs to take our power back from Washington because they've taken too much. It isn't theirs, it's ours, and we need to take it back. So engage, go take, come out against the vax mandate, come out against there's a couple of different things there. We also have our merchandise store. And the merchandise store has a lot of cool stuff. I actually lifted it up a month and a half ago, preparing for Christmas. And it's something that's going to continue on through the years. But we've got some great proprietary stuff. Tony Bronco, his cartoons are featured on Fox News every single day. We actually commission those 2 cartoons a week from him that are on Fox News. And so we've got a number of those cartoons that we've turned into puzzles. Makes a great gift for just, nephews and nieces or aunts and uncles who like to do puzzles. We've got everything from 250, 500, and 1,000 piece puzzles. So for all, ages and capacities. You have puzzles. We have artwork that is canvas artwork that is his drawings. We have some clothing. Truthfully, I've tried to keep away from having anything that's not made in the United States. The hat isn't. The hat's was made in Bangladesh. I just can't find a hat that I like that we can get done here. So, but there are some hats. We've got some bumper strips. We've got the Let's Go Brandon. We've got Liberty Lover bumper strips. We've got a couple things like that. So basically, it's just a place you can go and get some gifts. They're poignant. And they're good, and I think you'll like it. And the fact is, you can have it shipped directly. It won't be wrapped, but you have it shipped directly to your loved one, and they'll get it before Christmas, assuming you ordered early enough. So when you go to getliberty.org right now, I hope that you will click on that merch store and see if there's anything there you like. And if you do, great. If you don't, well, you don't. But it's a cheap way to go and see if it's something there that strikes your fancy, and whatever profit exists goes to the fight for freedom. So it has a dual purpose.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
I like that. Well, thanks so much, Rick. This has been a great conversation, as always. But to our viewers and listeners, we've got to say goodbye just for this segment. Of course, the Conservative Commandos will be back, but for Rick and myself, George Landreth, we will say goodbye for now.
Take care, guys.